All right, Mr. Renacci, this question is for you, sir, all right? Beginning this evening, you stated that you're basing your campaign on four ingredients: less government spending, strong military, tax cuts, restored values. Before I make my question, I'd like to make one comment. I don't know about many of you in this room here, but a lot of Americans and a lot of corporations did well under President Bill Clinton. And I'd also like to add that I remember these same statements from past President George W. Bush. And all I saw during his administration, with that same policies in mind of tax cuts, less spending, I saw the beginning of a catastrophe. I saw 800,000 jobs, good paying manufacturing jobs, leave this country and no way to stop it. That's where it all began. Don't blame President Bill Clinton on that. Okay, that's where it began. Now then, sir, I have a couple questions for you, all right? You mentioned in your campaign platform about tax cuts. Well, sir, you publicly said that you would have voted against the stimulus package, okay, which created and saved a lot of jobs and given middle-class working families, the backbone of this country, a large tax break, a large tax cut. Okay, I'm confused here. On one hand, you talk to us about tax cuts, but then you're on public record saying that you would have voted against that stimulus package, which would have gave hardworking Americans like myself a tax break. I don't understand that, sir. My first question on that comment is,
what is your question?
okay, here's the question, I'm getting to it. We got a pretty good understanding of where you stand on working families in this country, in this district. Would you support the extension of the Bush tax cuts to the 2% wealthiest Americans in this country? And if so, how are you going to accommodate that high price tag, that $2 trillion price tag that comes with those tax cuts? And sir, where would you cut in the budget to allow for these tax cuts?
It's a great question. I will tell you this. If we're going to cut taxes, which we need to do, we need to cut taxes across the board. And quite frankly, the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts, they affect working families by $1,200 per family. That's not coming from me. That's coming from the Congressional Budget Office and a lot of other sources. Middle-class Americans are affected by those those tax cuts. We cannot make the largest tax increase in history go forward at the end of this year, which I know Mr. Boccieri, I don't know, I think he probably will want to discontinue those.
How is that a tax increase, Mr. Mason?
It will be the largest tax increase ever. What we need to do is reduce spending. I've run a business, I've sat around the table, my parents have sat around the table. I argue very much with you not being I sat there in a blue-collar family, had to make ends meet, and I started my own business wondering how I was going to make the next payroll. All right? But I always made sure those people were paid. And the question always comes down to, in a business, you don't spend yourself out. You don't spend yourself into prosperity. You reduce costs. What we need to do is we need to start working on reducing this drastic deficit and this drastic spending. And then what you'll find is working people will get jobs, certainty will come back, but we need to do that now. So absolutely, you see that on my website.
I didn't answer my question, sir. My question is,
I answered your question. I said I am in favor of a lot, not
he said he answered.
I answered it.
Give working families a tax break.
I told you, you have to tax I said the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts do give you a break right now, and I stand for those staying in existence. I answered that question.
Sir, if I could, well, Mr. Renacci and I do share some things in common. He's a good dad. I think myself as a good father too. We share the same similarities in wanting to provide tax relief, but the difference is about where those tax cuts go. Couldn't be any more stark. He said he wouldn't support this, the recovery package that was investing in families. He wants to call it spending, but truly it was an investment in America, investing in workers, retraining them, getting them back out into the workforce, helping our universities and our colleges, investing in our curriculum and our studies that are going to help the American workers. Those are investments. I don't want to demagogue here about this, investment, but quite frankly, I don't see it the same way Mr. Renacci does. Number two is we're all for tax cuts, And the recovery package and the stimulus was the largest tax reduction for America's middle-class families, the shrinking middle-class families in the history of our country. The largest tax reduction in our country's history. Now, he would have supported those, but he would support President Bush's tax cuts that were paid for by borrowed money from China. By borrowed money from China. Now, we can't continue down that track. We can't continue by giving tax cuts and borrowing money from China. We are not doing that. I gotta tell you, we need to make sure that we grow the economy. We need sure that we grow the economy, and every 1% in the reduction of the unemployment, we get between $250 and $500 billion of revenue that comes into the federal government. So once we get our economic engine going again, our economy is going to be on a much more stable.
You know what's great? You know what the great?
You guys just got from China.
Yeah. You know what's great about having this discussion? And you know, when Mr. Boccieri walked in, he said that this was one of my campaign events. I'm glad to see there are people here from the other side asking those questions. These are great questions. But the truth of it is, Mr. Boccieri has to start looking at his math. Because when you talk about the tax cuts versus how much trillions of dollars in debt we are, they don't match up. And it's almost like a lot of things he's done in the past. Make sure you hold him accountable to the actual dollars and cents he's talking about, and that's when we'll be able to decide whether he's saying facts or fiction.
Well, your question of my math, I've paid my taxes all the time, Mr. Renacci. So.
Yeah, I always love that one too, by the way. That's it. You know what? It's interesting because, as you know, Mr. Boccieri walked in here, he's made about 5 dollars. I'm clearly not going to go there. I don't need to go there. But I will say this. If he looks at my record, he will find that appealing your taxes, and by the way, reporting it 100% correctly the same way you did 5 years prior, and marking on the box that you were doing that, what Mr. Boccieri and his staff never looked at. If they look at that, they'll see that not only did I report it, but I appealed it. And that's something I think all of you would want me to do as your congressman. Work for when a retroactive tax comes into place. You don't deserve it, and you need to have somebody stand up for you. And there were 1,000 other business owners that did that. So when Mr. Boccieri throws that, he's got to make sure he knows exactly the whole story. But I'm proud of that move, and that's the kind of congressman you got to have.
Question here. Mr. Renacci, you know what? I think I can speak loud enough. Can you hear me?
No.
I think we're having problems with the microphone.
Use the mic.
My question is, as a single parent, raising 3 children during this really tough economy, and I think all of us, whether we're independents, Democrat, Republicans, we're sharing a terrible, terrible economic time. My concern is, I've seen the Republican Congress repeatedly vote against extending unemployment, and it's a really hard place to fall. I don't think anybody that I'm aware of or that I know is looking for a handout. They want a hand up, is what they're asking for. And my concern is during these very, very difficult times that we're having now, would you fall in line with the Republican Congress and vote against or not want to continue the extension of unemployment?
Let me tell you the answer there, and it's the answer about whether I would fall in line. We know Mr. Boccieri's position. He falls in line with Nancy Pelosi. My position will always be this. I'm going down there to serve the 16th district, and when it comes to that question, I believe if we extend those, we need to cut other programs and other costs so that we can do that and do it right. We cannot continue to spend the money we're spending, or all of us are going to be in trouble years from now as this deficit continues to grow and grow and grow. So the answer to your question is, I would work very hard to extend those as long as, and it's the same thing the Republicans said, people just don't hear them sometimes. The Republicans said, let's just find out places where you can cut expenses so we can do that.
So I feel good in knowing that you would, support extending it.
I would support you. I would support it being extended, but I would also support at the same time a reduction of expenses at the same time.